Well, hello there, everybody. Welcome on into the Space Cowboy Show. I hope you guys are having a great day today. I understand that the Dallas Cowboys are 1-2, and it looks bleak for them. But I think this would be the perfect time to talk about the other instances that the Dallas Cowboys have started 1-2, how those seasons resulted in, and also mention how first-time head coaches have done and how guys went with their first year while they were the head coach here in Dallas. We're going to talk about all that in today's video, but before we get started, if you could do me a favor, please hit that like button. It helps the channel out a whole lot in the YouTube algorithm, and it's free to do. Next, if you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button if you are new and want to get more Dallas Cowboys content in your feed. And hit that notification bell so you get notified when videos like this come out or when I go live during post-game shows and other things. And finally, if you want to support the channel further, you can hit that join button and look to become a channel member today. Now, with all the pleasantries out of the way, let's go ahead and start off with the first topic, and that is, how have the Cowboys looked when they started 1-2. Now, looking at the history of the entire Dallas Cowboys franchise and how they've fared when they've gone 1-2, as you can see here, they have gone 1-2 several times in franchise history. More recently, they've done this last year, and they missed the playoffs. If we're looking at it in a broader sense of the 21st century, the Dallas Cowboys have only made the playoffs one time, starting off 1-2, and that was in 2018. That year they went 10-6. Obviously, you guys might remember that was the year they made the trade for Amari Cooper, where they had an insane stretch run towards the tail end to win the NFC East and ultimately lost to the Rams in that playoff game we're all synonymous about, knowing how CJ Anderson and Todd Gurley ran all over that team. But going back into the 20th century, we have seen them make the playoffs multiple times, starting off 1-2, but for the most part, when you start off 1-2, especially with this franchise, it is basically a death sentence in the 21st century. So now we enter Green Bay Packers week, and with that, the Dallas Cowboys are staring down the barrel of a 1-3 start. And not to be super negative, but we're taking on a team that the Dallas Cowboys have not beat since 2016, no matter what the circumstances were, no matter what the location was. You haven't beaten them since 2016, Dak's rookie year, where you blew them out at Lambeau Field. So if the Dallas Cowboys do start 1-3, there's only been one time where they have made the playoffs, and that was back in 1996, the year they went to the divisional round and they took on the Panthers, and we all understand how that ended. But you are looking basically at a instance where you're most likely going to be losing double-digit games in this season, because in the 21st century that has been the case. When they've started 1-3, they have lost double-digit games. The last time they started 1-3 was 2020, and that was Mike McCarthy's first year in Dallas. And then the only other times that that's happened for the Cowboys was in 2010 and the year 2000. And so that is something where you're avoiding to go down that path. So let's go down the hopium route. What if the Dallas Cowboys started 2-2? Well, they've done that many times in franchise history, and the odds of them making the playoffs go up. The last time they started 2-2 was back last year. They went 7-10, as we're very much well aware of. But the last time the Cowboys went 2-2 and made the postseason was back in 2018. If you are not familiar already with that year, the year that we had Amari Cooper traded to the Cowboys, they went on that insane stretch run. The defense looked really good. And then on top of that, they went into the divisional round and got ran all over by the Los Angeles Rams. But every other time outside of that, you're looking at instances where they've missed the playoffs for the most part, or if they did manage to make it, they're barely making it in as a wild card, or just as the outlier being in 2009 in the 21st century, where it came down to the final week of the season where they beat the Eagles to get the division title, and they beat them the following week in the wild card round before losing in the divisional round to the Minnesota Vikings. So I understand a bit of a history lesson there on that front, but I think it's important you understand that if this team starts out 1-3, the season is basically over in terms of what the statistics say. If you go 2-2, we're having a bit of a different conversation. And of course, the record says one thing, but to quote Bill Parcells, you are what your record says you are. And on top of that, I would agree. You're 1-2. You don't look like a good football team. If you are 1-3, you're most likely going to be a very bad football team this year. Now, in terms of the draft pick watch, and I said we were going to start this as we got further through the year. As we currently stand here today, the Dallas Cowboys own the 10th overall pick of their own, and then the Packers pick is the 26th overall pick. If you manage to beat the Green Bay Packers, that of course helps you in that department. It hurts your pick a bit, but like I've always said, you are going into this season rooting for the Cowboys to do what they can, and if they end up being in a situation where the season's lost, you want that pick as high as possible. And of course, you have extra incentive to root against the Green Bay Packers because you own their first round pick, not only for 2026, but for 2027. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is with the Green Bay Packers, they're going into this game after losing to the Cleveland Browns, which is a very winnable game for them. And I guarantee you that Jordan Love is going to probably put 40 points on you. And I say that, and we'll see the Cowboys somehow win a game that they had no intention of winning. But I really think, knowing history, I would have to go with that. And we'll talk about that more when we get to the pregame video for the Packers game. But now I wanted to talk about how other coaches have done when they were first-time head coaches and what's really the average. What should we expect for first-time head coaches? Because that's something we should be aware of as Cowboys fans. Now, looking at this article done by ProFootballHistory.com, there are a couple takeaways that we can look at that we can maybe try to apply to the Cowboys here, or maybe we are an outlier. Number one, we typically see that rookie NFL head coaches typically improve team win totals by an average of 2 wins. If that is to be true, then the Dallas Cowboys have to finish 9-8 for that statistic to be true, with 26 out of the 40 coaches leading teams to better records. So again, that's not a certainty, but that's what we're looking at. First-time coaches exhibit a 41.7% playoff likelihood and a .447 winning percentage, demonstrating significant potential for immediate team transformation. Now, that is yet to be seen. We're still very early into this year, so that's something that we'll have to keep an eye out on as we move forward. Typically, when I make these types of videos, we want to archive these and go forward from there. Now, the other thing that we want to be interested in is that 68% of the recent head coaching hires were first-time head coaches. So that is a statistic that we are a part of there. So that's one thing. And then the other interesting notes are that teams scoring under 18 points per game often experience dramatic improvements, with new coaches potentially generating up to 5.3 additional wins. We'll see how that fares for the Cowboys. And finally, successful coaching trajectories show significant improved performance growth, with win rates increasing from 31.39% to 50.86% over 3 consecutive seasons. Now, again, that's very much so to be determined. But when we look at what's going on, the main takeaway as you go through this article is that typically new head coaches have seen to improve their teams, not only in the short term, but also in the long term. Again, we're talking about not retreads, we're talking about first-time head coaches. And so that is where, when we come back to the Dallas Cowboys and having first-time head coaches, we are looking to see how do we go from the previous coach to this coach and what would be considered a success. Now, going off of these statistics that we just talked about, if we went from Wade Phillips to Jason Garrett, you went from a 6-10 football club to an 8-8 football club. Now, you can talk about how Jason Garrett was the interim head coach and then he got the job, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to just talk about a full season, first-time season, with the whole program being operated under that head coach. So they did have a 2-win improvement. And if that is going to be the case, like I said just recently, if we are going off of this data, then we should see the Dallas Cowboys have a 2-win improvement and go 9-8 at minimum this year. But that doesn't mean that's a certainty. It's just what the trends have shown. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is how have head coaches fared here in Dallas with their first year. That doesn't mean they had to be first-time head coach or a retread. It's just straight up how have the other coaches in Cowboys history fared in their first years as Cowboys head coach. Now, looking at the history here, we start off with Tom Landry 0-11-1. Jimmy Johnson went 1-15. Barry Switzer went 12-4. Chan Gailey 10-6. Dave Campo 5-11. You then have Bill Parcells 10-6. Wade Phillips 13-3, Jason Garrett 8-8, and Mike McCarthy 6-10. So it's very much so hit or miss. Now, granted, not all of these situations are created equally. Obviously, we're well aware of the fact that Tom Landry is a part of an expansion team. Jimmy Johnson taking over a team that was absolutely dreadful. Barry Switzer's taking over a team that is very talented in Jimmy Johnson's team. You can even maybe say a little bit of the same with Chan Gailey, despite the fact that there was a little bit of juice left in the dynasty, but still going 10-6 given that roster solid. Dave Campo, literally the dead end of the dynasty, 5-11. Bill Parcells, which was probably the most impressive of the bunch because of how that offense was operating and how well that defense was, going 10-6 is very impressive. Wade Phillips taking over for a Bill Parcells squad that has developed a lot of talent, going 13-3. Jason Garrett taking over a team that's in the middle of a rebuild slash retool and going 8-8 after going 6-10 the previous year. And then Mike McCarthy, I would say the same thing, taking over for a team that's going through a bit of a mini retool in 2020. Now, of course, we're still in the season of Brian Schottenheimer, and we got to figure out, okay, how is this first year going to look? But typically, it's very hit or miss. You're either going to make the playoffs or you're going to end up not making the playoffs. I know that sounds so generic to say, but looking at history here, there's a higher likelihood with the other coaches that I'm looking at here where they have made the playoffs as opposed to missing them. And so with that in mind, okay, what exactly do we need to see moving forward? Do we need to see a playoff appearance? Does that mean anything? Like I've said several times, and I know I sound like a broken record, and you guys probably want to strangle me through the video because Space, you keep saying the same thing. But I think that it's not being talked about a whole lot because you have other dudes gassing up this team on YouTube, on Twitter/X, Facebook, you name it, thinking this is a very good team, when in reality, if you look at it for what it is, it's a team that's in a soft retool/rebuild. You're not going to get another quarterback. You're not looking to do that, so it's not a hard rebuild. You already have enough talent as is to do well enough to get you some wins, but in terms of having postseason success, I don't think that's in the cards for the Dallas Cowboys. So we're seeing the run game improve. The pass game is hit or miss, but the defense has been the biggest area of failure for this team. And I think that's a glaring fact of you not being able to move off of Micah Parsons and giving the guys that Matt Eberflus needs, because this idea that Matt Eberflus is a terrible defensive coordinator, I think, is a fallacy, because when you look at what he did in Indianapolis, when he was able to get his guys, his defensive tackles, the linebackers, you name it, when you gave him the personnel that he needed, they had a top 10 unit. So I don't necessarily think that he's cooked or anything like that just yet, because it's really going to come down to how are you constructing this defense? This is the third different defensive coordinator you've had in the past 3 seasons, and so you're having to go through different changes of how you're doing things. So it's just so awkward with where we're at right now, and I thought that this was the perfect time to talk about it, and I wanted to hear your thoughts down below. Do you think the Cowboys are going to be terrible this year? If so, how do you think they're going to fare? And what are your prospects for Brian Schottenheimer moving forward? Because, of course, we'll talk about that after the year is over. How did teams progress as we go through that? But if we look at how things are going through statistically, we should see an improvement this year. While it is very early, we still have yet to be determined on that. But with that, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Please make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, hit the notification bell and all that other stuff, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Have a good one, guys. Goodbye.